Welcome back to the Humans of the Heart podcast. I'm your host, Eva, and today I have a special guest, Elsa of Vibrant Legacy Wellness. And I'm so excited for our conversation. Elsa is someone who is a true trailblazer and cycle breaker, and we always have the most fascinating conversations. So I'm really excited for Elsa to share her wisdom and perspective here with us. And we will just let the conversation flow. So, Elsa, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit more about what you currently do?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I am a serial entrepreneur. My baby is my wellness business, my Vibrant Legacy Wellness, and I do also have a consulting business where I primarily work with wellness companies and people in the medical field and profession, any type of professional medical wellness, all of that, because that is where my passion is. I'm also a TCM and working toward my doctorate on that. And I guess I call myself a bit of a disruptor. My definition of disruption is making a change. I think people think disruption is a bad thing, but I don't. And I'm all about building community and connections. Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's such an honor. So, I want to start off by diving deeper into this disruptor energy because I think I've navigated being a disruptor too, and I've noticed that not everyone is always open to being in that position. A lot of times people get triggered when you bring things up or you want to share what you're seeing. And I think from a disruptor perspective, or at least from my perspective, I see it as I want to help people be better. I want to bring awareness to things that might be in the shadows for them. And I totally get how people are not always open or willing or ready to go there. But I guess I'd be curious to hear your perspective and how you've navigated that to not just go around triggering people all the time. So I'm curious to hear.
First off, I want to say I absolutely agree. I think sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. But for me, I think it's important to not purposely trigger people, but I also think that sometimes we have to trigger people to get a change. And when I say trigger people to get a change, I don't mean I'm purposely trying to poke the bear, I'm purposely trying to upset you. But sometimes people need to be, I don't want to say, I feel like triggered isn't the right word here, but sometimes people need to be uncomfortable to realize that there's a problem. And I think that for me, navigating is really situational. It depends on the situation, the circumstance, who I'm dealing with, on whether or not I'm going to handle it with a little bit more gentle or a little bit more aggressively. And I think most of the time you can handle things gently and just be like that person. I think disruption is also just about asking questions. And I think that's what we always want to look at it. Oh, it's that person who goes in and full force, yelling and screaming, I want change and this has to happen. And I don't think that's what it is. Sometimes it's simply just asking the question, why do you feel like this is okay? Why do you feel like you should be able to do this? Why do you feel like fill in the blank? And I think for me, navigating that space has not always been easy, but I grew up in a house full of disruptors. We're always going against the grain. And I think it's really important to figure out how to be disruptive and respectful at the same time, because I do think it's possible. And I think it just really depends on if you see something at work that needs a change and you speak up about it and you notice that that doesn't do anything. You now have to navigate that situation in a different way, still being respectful, not getting in trouble at work, and doing something that's going to incite change. And I think it's the same in the world altogether because if we keep allowing things to continue to be the way they always were, nothing's going to change and everything will just continue in this cycle, this circle where nothing ever ends, nothing ever changes, and nothing ever gets better. So I think, I don't know, disruption is really hard, but I don't think it's necessarily bad.
Wow, I love the nuance that you brought up around you can be disruptive and still do it respectfully and in a gentle way. It doesn't have to be Like, I don't know, the visual I have is an activist screaming at a protest or something. It can be on this smaller scale, but that doesn't mean that the impact isn't as important as bigger disruption.
My perfect description of this is a child, right? A little child, a toddler who really just they're learning the world, they're learning how to talk. They, every day, they ask you why a million times. Go put this away. Why? Go put this in your room. Why? I need you to do this. Why? And as an adult or as a parent, it gets annoying because you're like, just do it. But once you explain to them why they have to do it, they're like, huh, I'll go do it, right? And I feel like that's kind of how disruption works. When you see something wrong, sometimes you just have to put that question out there. Why are we doing it this way? Because it makes people think about it, think about their actions, think about their words. And sometimes that is enough disruption to change the system.
And it makes me think too about how when in our own lives, a lot of the moments where we've chosen to change or to do something differently, there had to be some level of discomfort or awareness around, oh, what I'm currently doing is just not working and I need to try something else. I have to approach it in a different way and see if that will be better. And so it's interesting because I feel like everyone experiences this. Life has so many moments of opportunities of transformation and change. And really, change and growth, I feel like, are woven into our existence. And I feel like the people who actually create something magnificent in their life that's meaningful to them are the ones willing to go through the discomfort. It's bringing up to how doing inner work. I've been having this conversation recently with people around what stops people from saying yes to that and from taking time to meet themselves and their parts. And a lot of it is fear of what will come up or what parts they're going to meet, ones that everyone wants to suppress or that are ashamed about. And for me, it's just like I've been doing this work for 8 years now in my own life and within myself. And it's like just a way of life for me. So to me, when something happens, I naturally go into that self-awareness, reflective state to understand and then to also take responsibility for my role in it and then work on whatever my stuff is that's coming up because I recognize that that's all I can do, right? I can't change someone else or choose for them. So I take responsibility and work on in my own lane, if you will. But it's interesting because I see a lot of people avoiding or not willing to even go there. And for me, the freedom I've experienced on the other side of doing the healing and the inner work is just worth it every time. I feel so much better. I feel more expansive. I feel like I'm navigating life in a clearer way. And it's like non-negotiable at this point. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on any of that.
I think that as we grow, we realize that part of that is the inner work. I think a lot of times especially when in Western cultures, because everything is go, go, go fast, we don't take the time to look at the whole situation and everything is external. And then we start thinking that everything happens because of external. And we don't think about how important it is for us to do the inner work and how important it is for us to just self regulate. So I don't know. I think I've been doing this for a while too, just the inner work. I think how we all get into this healing community is we start doing the inner work and then we're like, man, I got to tell somebody about this because it worked so well. And then I think that what becomes normal to us, we have to step back and remember when it wasn't normal. And then I think that's how we help each other and two, we build community, but it's all about that. The first step is always realizing that inner work needs to be done.
And as we're talking about inner work and disruption, then I got this question about, do you feel like you're a disruptor for yourself? And what does that look like versus being a disruptor for others?
Oh, I think I'm definitely a disruptor for myself. I think that for me, I grew up in a house where we have very clear rules, but also My parents were very much like, go do what you need to do, but also don't break the rules, right? So it's kind of this weird in between space. And I think for a long time, I did things very traditionally. I went, did my 9 to 5, came home, did whatever was expected, but I was really not happy with that. I got to a point where I was like, this is not what I want to do. And I think for me, the first disruption was really just following my heart and going into not starting my own business. That wasn't the disruption. It's the type of business that I started that was the disruption. Because my first business was just a virtual assistant business, which now turned into my consulting business. That is very much follow the status quo, right? Because it's very traditional type business. You keep going and do whatever. But then when I started my wellness business, that is so out of the box. And I think that was really my first step to disruption. I started my business right before the pandemic. And so then I started it, and then the pandemic happened, and I was like, how do I navigate this now? Because it's a wellness business and we can't really be well. And so I had to navigate what does wellness look like on a different level. And I think
Mm.
that was my first disruption because I had to ask myself, what does that mean for me? And I think stepping outside of that box and changing how I viewed myself and how I viewed my personal wellness is my first big disruption. I had other disruptions, of course, for myself along the way, but I think for me, that was the first step out of the box and don't be afraid to do something different. And I would love to say that I think I show up differently for other people than I show up for myself, but I kind of think that I don't. I think that for me, it's always about what am I led to do? What do I feel drawn to do? And then when I work with other people or I want to collaborate with other people, I also want them to disrupt themselves in order to disrupt the system. And I think that's the big thing is what is disruption in ourselves? Because that's how we know how to navigate disruption in the world. Because when you start navigating your own disruption, when you start thinking about how do I want to show up? What do I want to change for myself? Those are also the things that you want to change in the world.
What are the current things that you're disrupting within yourself and supporting in disrupting in the world?
I think just being on this path that I'm on now with the wellness business and where I want it to go and how I want it to impact, and even my school journey, I am on, I would say, at least for here in the US, a non-traditional path. I'm studying traditional Chinese medicine. That is what I'm going to school for and getting my doctorate in. And I think here that's seen as very non-traditional. Perfect example, I met someone earlier this week and we were just talking about it and he literally said, "Oh, that sounds a little woo." It's actually not. He's like, it's kind of new age. It's actually older than our medicine, so it's not new age, but it's just that thought process of me being comfortable with that. And I think supporting myself is just not being afraid to show up in the spaces that I'm in because I do a lot of I'm very big in my own personal spiritual journey. And I think my spiritual journey is also seen as non-traditional because I don't follow, I think, expected spiritual norms, expected social norms. And I think that for me is just being supportive for myself is also surrounding myself with other people who are in that same space, who feel comfortable, who want to be themselves. And I think just being myself and being comfortable being myself. And when I'm not comfortable or I feel triggered, is just sitting with myself and saying, why do you feel uncomfortable? Why do you feel triggered? Why are you afraid to take that next step? And I think that's the big thing for me is just being comfortable with not following the status quo and being outside of the box.
That's something that really parallels between both of our journeys. I also really love just going against the status quo and just paving my own path forward. If I see a lot of people doing a certain trend, sometimes I get curious, but a lot of times I'll reject it because I want to do something unique, like that feels better. I love that you're also bringing up the who you surround yourself with because that's been a huge learning lesson for me the last year. Started getting these messages from spirit around collaboration and community, and it started really clicking. All the business owners that I was witnessing who created these thriving businesses, they did it together in community in some capacity, whether it was they had a mentor who started connecting them to clients, or they went on podcasts and did collaborations this way to get in front of different audiences or just did events together with other people. I think there's a lot of power in there's a lot of power in rising together and seeing each other as we can learn so much from each other and we through our collaboration we're also growing because there's something each person brings to the table, whether it's a different perspective or their experience or their skills or their specialty, how you're studying the Chinese medicine. So I really love that and really resonate with that.
So I want to speak on trends a little bit because you said something that I find interesting. I'm usually an anti-trend person. I love to watch the trends, but I'm probably not going to do it. There is a recent trend right now. I don't know when this is going to air, so maybe that this trend will be dead by then, but I'm sure that people are talking about it, so they'll know. And this is the group seven trend. And just I'll give you a little background of the trend so that your audience knows what it is. So I was just on TikTok scrolling instead of being productive. And this video came up with this song, and this girl was talking to us, and she's like, "You're in group seven, blah." And so, what's group seven? This seems like a cool trend. Let's look and see. And there was something very interesting that happened with this trend. She made groups one through seven, and she attached a different. She's a singer outside of Australia. Her name is Sophia James, and she made a different song for each group. And something magical happened with group seven, and it turned into a trend. And I have to say, looking at it now and where it is now, it's really, I think that the reason that I actually decided to participate in this trend because it resonated with me because of what happened. So, group seven, I don't know how the algorithm picked us, but group seven decided to turn this into a movement of support and community and networking. And people in group seven, they all decided that we're going to just support everybody in group seven because she said we were in group seven. Everybody started sharing her song. They started using it as their background because she's like, if you're in group seven, this is the song for group seven. And then I started noticing that people were making posts saying, if you're in group seven, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to support you. You come over here, I'm going to support everything you do and cheer you on. And I think that says a lot about humanity. We always forget that that's the important part. We're supposed to be here to build community, to love each other, to lift each other up. And do we see some negative things happening with people in group seven? Of course, that's going to be everywhere. But overall, I don't see why the algorithm picked all of us for group seven, but what I do notice is that everybody is completely different. Everybody's trying to make a connection and figure out what is it about group seven that made it magical. And I think what made it magical is that everybody in group seven felt like, oh, we're part of this community where we're going to support each other and support her. Let's do it. And everybody just jumped on board and really started supporting each other. There are even meetups happening. People are like, if you're in group seven and you're in this city, we're having meetups. I live in California, I live in San Diego, and I've seen a couple of group seven in person meetups happening that people are inviting people to. And I just think trends like that I love because it reminds us that we are all connected, that we can lift each other up no matter what, that we don't have to have the same views on everything, but we are still able to build a community and build a connection and really just like love each other just because we're all humans.
There's definitely something around coming together and unifying. I feel like people in their everyday lives feel this with whatever they believe spiritually, having the support of a higher power. And, or if you believe in spirit guides or angels or deities, connecting to that support. And it's like the same thing in the physical world to connect to other humans. And that's really beautiful. I love that you're bringing this up because it might feel like a small scale thing, but I think it's important for us to remember that it's about coming together and about seeing the humanness within each other. And I think with all the stuff that's going on right now, too, it reminds us that our power really is in our numbers, us coming together versus trying to have one or two people overpower. It's about how can we come together? What can we do collectively? Whether it's going to a protest or boycotting a certain company that is to express what we're feeling and what we're not okay with, setting those boundaries collectively. But I think it doesn't matter if one or two people do it, but it's when we have. I remember when all this stuff started happening with the Latino community, and I would see all these TikToks about them coming together and they would be raising their flag. And I love witnessing humans come together and seeing interactions of the goodness in the world. I think that's really important to remember that there's goodness just as much as there might be the badness too. We can't forget that there's always going to be that contrast. And especially right now, as we're moving through a big disruption collectively, I think it's easy to lose sight of the goodness when we're so focused and bombarded with all the craziness that's happening.
The division. And I think that's the biggest thing that we don't look at is yes, disruption can be positive or negative, but I think the biggest part is dividing us. And I think that's what we are misunderstanding here is that all of this is just division. As long as we are divided, we can never come together. And I know that sounds just, yes, of course, it makes sense. If we're divided, we can't come together. But what I mean by that is we can't fix the problem. We can't fix the problems, all of them, the issues. We can't address our concerns if we are divided. We are so busy. I don't know if you've ever heard this before, is don't wait for a response. Don't wait to voice your response. Actually listen to what the other person is saying. And I think right now, everybody is just waiting for the other person to stop talking so they can respond, but they're never actually listening. And I think that's keeps us divided. That's why we're so divided, is where we're not, and then we're not listening. And then when we do listen, only one side is listening at a time. Maybe today this side is listening, maybe tomorrow that side is listening, but both people aren't listening and trying to find that midpoint because everything in life is about compromise and coming together. And I think right now, building a community, I think that's also why trends like this get so big, is because it's like something we can all come together on. And it reminds us that, hey, we can actually come together and agree on something, even if it's something that's small. But it's those little ripples that start bringing us together in other areas, I think.
And then the beauty of the community then is that you feel that support. You feel like you're not doing it alone. And I think that can uplift anyone, no matter what you're going through. Why do people have the support groups for addictions or for grief? But there's so many types of support groups to navigate different things happening in life. And it's about that coming together and feeling like you have a space to go to share. And I do also agree with you on the communication. I've witnessed this on social media many times where people they only care about expressing their perspective and they're not actually open to a different way. They only know their way and they're going to tell you. And then no matter what you say, even if you're genuinely asking them, why do you feel that way or where does this come from for you? Not everyone is open. I think a lot of people are starting to open just with events that are happening. It seems like there is more openness than before and people are realizing, oh, maybe things are not the way that I thought. Because you're talking about earlier, when we're young kids, we're learning about the world, but we're learning through not just what we're living. A lot of times as kids, we're learning by what we're being told. And so we're being trained from young how to approach life. And if you have a community or caregivers that teach you to be open to hearing other perspectives and to learning from the world, then those people are going to go on and be open. But if you teach someone that their way is the only way or that they know better than others, those people will have more of that sense of superiority and be more closed off to listening. And it's really sad because I think people get so caught up in teams. I'm on this team, you're on the other team, so therefore we're fighting against each other. And I think honestly, it's done in that way by design. You said to keep us divided, but what I'm really trying to my best to promote is the community, the unity, and then I'm just trusting whoever's open to it will hop on board, and then people who are not, we can only do so much, right? Because it has to come from within. They have to have the willingness from within themselves. If someone's just being told something and they're not willing to accept it or to see something in a certain way, it's a lost cause. And frankly, I feel like it's a big waste of energy to try to convince them otherwise. So,
I think once people get a thought in their mind, they have to have a moment for themselves to change their mind and see a different point of view because they're stuck in that point of view. Whether it's something that they learned or something that they adapted to within their experiences, it's really hard to. I always say people are going to believe what they're going to believe until they don't. And for me, what that means is, let's say that I heard a rumor about you, and I'm a type of person who just follows the rumor. I'm going to keep believing that rumor and I'm not going to give you an opportunity to change it. So, from my perspective, if I were you, there's no point of arguing with you because I don't have to prove myself to you. And also, no matter what I say, I'm not going to be able to prove myself to you because you already had that perspective. And then one day something happens and my perspective of you changes because of an interaction, right? But it wasn't because of anything you said, because everything that you said to me meant nothing. Everything that you showed me meant nothing. I had to see it for myself. And I think that's why we have to build community because people have to be able to see that there's something different and experience it themselves because no matter what you tell them, that's not going to change their narrative because their narrative is their perspective and their perspective is their reality until it's not. Even if it's not actual reality, it's their reality because that is what they choose to believe.
perspective is so important. I love that you brought up the example of hearing a rumor because that happens every day. People have conversations and will share their experiences, but the thing that I've learned in life, because I used to be the person who would just follow what I was being told and not really question things as much. But with human relationships, what I've learned is the best thing you can ever do is go directly to the source and go to that person and have that conversation yourself. Because if we're all playing game of telephone, there's going to be things misunderstood, misheard, misinterpreted along the way. And so you don't know the message that you're getting or what you're hearing, what filters that went through before that information got to you. I have so many examples, and I'm sure you do as well, of experiences like that where you hear something and then you hear directly also from the person, and the stories are just not matching up. And you're like, and it took a lot for me to realize and understand the power of our perspective, like you're saying. I remember I had this really eye-opening experience at a previous job with a coworker where we were really cool at first when she first started working there. And then one day she came in and she was like just in a mood. And I have no idea why she was in a mood or what was going on. She didn't share, but I took it personally. And then my perspective of her shifted from now, from being someone that I'm cool with to, oh, she has a problem with me, or she's upset because she was like, snappy with me that day. And then from that day on, for maybe about a week or two, I had an issue with her because of that day that her mood changed, because I'm very sensitive to people's energy and patterns. So I pick up on a shift right away. It could be so subtle. It could be the face they make or just the way they, like the tone. And I pick up on it so easily. So, and then I had this moment where I was walking my dog. I always get insights when I'm walking my dogs. And I had this moment where all of a sudden it just clicked. I had this question of why do I now have a problem with her? What happened? We were cool and there was no problem. And it's so funny because I always feel like I'm responding to something the other person's doing, but I feel like in their perspective, they see it the same way but flipped. They see my shift and then they start responding. So it's a mutual thing. We each think that the other one started it, which is so funny. But in this moment was when I realized all that changed from when she first started working there to now is the way I see her. And that's when I realized, holy shit, my perspective is so powerful because I went from not having a problem with her, getting along, to avoiding her, to keeping distance, all because my view of her changed. And I've had that happen on the flip side of people shifting their perspective of me too and being the villain in some people's stories. And I almost feel like now I'm at the point where I just accept if people want to give me the chance to share my side of it and work through it together, I'm more than willing to do that. But for anyone who feels like their mind is made up, I'm not here to beg people to be in my life. If that was enough to impact our relationship, then it probably wasn't even gonna go far anyway, if something so small. It really does come down to the relationships, I feel like.
That, and also I think we have that other factor of it comes down to just personalities, right? Because I might get along with someone but it can be a totally different experience. I'll give you an example. I had this professor, and everyone was like, he is horrible. He's so hard. He doesn't ever do this. And I had a class with him, and it was a very small class. And me and one of the other girls in the class were sitting there, and I was like, do you have to use the bathroom? We've been sitting here for it was a long class because we just go to class 1 day a week for the whole class. So you're in there for like 3, 4 hours. And I'm like, we've been sitting here for 2 hours and I drink this whole bottle of water. And I was like, I'm sorry, can we go to the bathroom? Because we need bathroom breaks. I don't know how you sit here all day and don't go to the bathroom. And he was like, no one's ever said that they had to go to the bathroom before, so I never thought about it. Right. And from that day on, he just gave us a break. And it was just that little shift, right? I think change our interaction with him because from that point on, we were like, oh, he's a great teacher. We had a totally different experience from these other classes. And they were like, he does what for you guys? He does that. He lets you guys take breaks. He does this. And I think it all comes down to just how we interact with people and personalities because our class thought he was the greatest teacher ever. We're like, he's awesome. We have so much fun in his class. The other classes are like, he's so mean. He's so hard. He doesn't ever let us go to the bathroom. And I was like, did you actually ask him if you could go to the bathroom? Did you try that? And they were like, why would we do that? Do you have to use the bathroom? That shift alone made they were like, wow, ever since that day we asked him to go to the bathroom, he's so nice. See, it's all about perspective and interaction because they thought he was a horrible, mean teacher. Literally, he just can hold his bladder for 12 hours. It's just little things like that.
I love that because it really does paint the picture of how that communication, it becomes the bridge between where you're at and where the other person is. And a lot of times people just don't realize what you need or where you're coming from until you speak up and say something. I guess I'm curious if there's anything else that comes up for you around advocating for yourself or having more communication, how you've seen that play out in your life or other people's experiences.
Advocating for myself, I think, is a tricky thing because I feel like for myself, and I think this goes back to that whole disruption and your self awareness. Because for myself, I will take a lot more. You can say what you want to say. I'll just be like, oh, well, that's your perspective. But if I see you doing the same thing to someone else and they look like they're in a space where they're not okay, I will instantly feel the need to jump in and defend them or say, hey, especially if it's someone like it that I care about that's in my personal loved ones, I'm quick to defend them. But if it was myself, I would probably just, okay, fine. If that's how you feel about it, that's your perspective, right? But me seeing that same action to someone else, I want to jump in. I think it's harder for me to advocate for myself than it is for others because it's natural for me to, and I I don't necessarily think that that's just people pleasing. I think part of it is people pleasing, but I think another part of it is just for myself. I know that narrative doesn't matter because I've done a lot of self work to where I feel like I don't have to prove myself to you because at the end of the day, I don't feel like I'm ever going to prove myself to you because you have your perspective. But for other people, I don't always feel like it's about proving themselves. I feel like it's about you can't hurt people's feelings without
Mm,
consequences. And so I think, I don't know, navigating just advocacy in general, I think it's just really tricky because I think it's natural for us to speak up for others. And I think it's not natural for us to speak up for ourselves, which sounds
mhm.
so backwards, but I think that that's just how, I just think that's how society is.
And it brings up this story where we could go down this slippery slope of putting others' needs ahead of yours, filling up everyone else's cup before you're being served your cup of water or whatever it is. I think too, sometimes that plays into like traditional gender roles too. Oh, the woman has to take care of the household and do all these things, and then the man has to go do this. But it's interesting what you're talking about with connection to self versus connection for others. I feel like people are all seem to always be stronger in one versus the other. So if they wouldn't stand up for themselves, they don't have as big of a problem doing it for others. But then for themselves, it's harder. And I find it really interesting why that is because I'll use this with clients and also with my partner. Anyone who I notice won't advocate for themselves in the moment, I do this trick where, well, it's not like a trick, but it's just like perspective that I offer them. So I will ask them, think about someone you really care about. And then for my partner, I usually use me as the example. So let's use him. So if, for instance, he's like, oh, I really want to go get food, but oh no, it's like too late or it's fine. And I can tell that he really wants to go get food. Like he's hungry, he needs food. But he's like, "Oh, no, no, it's fine," because he's so used to that story of, "It's fine, I don't need it, I'm okay," and not taking care of himself. So, I always stop him and I ask him, "If I was telling you that I needed to go get food, would we be sitting here or would we be going to go get the food?" And his answer is always, "We would be going to get the food." And so I use it too with clients to just put it into perspective. You may not be willing to do this for yourself, but if this was your daughter, if this was your partner, if this was whatever loved one who you care for, use that caring and then flip it to yourself. Now treat yourself that way. Because I think we are kind of in this pandemic, if you will, of self connection. We're not really taught how to do that. And a lot of us end up disconnecting because of what we're taught as kids, what the rules are, and we override what we're feeling on the inside and what we know as our truth to follow the rules that we're told. And I just feel like I'm here to help disrupt that, if you will, because what kind of life is that? Just following the rules and staying in the box and just not ever pursuing anything that makes you feel alive, that you can look back on your life and feel like you fully lived and look back and have no regrets with what you pursued because you gave it your all. I feel like everyone deserves that chance to give themselves the opportunity to at least go for it and see what happens and pursue what feels alive for them in their heart because I think everyone has dreams, like seeds of dreams planted, and only we can feel what that dream is because it's meant for us to pursue it.
I agree. But I think that's part of why I love your community so much because I feel like there's so much of that encouragement to pursue our dreams and to just, it feels like, how do I say? I feel like it's about community, but it's also about as of your individual journey as part of the community. I know that was my mic drop for the day.
I love that. Because we all are having these individual journeys. If you think about a mountain, and then there's like all these different paths you can take. You can even get off of the path and like come back on the path or like stay off the path and still find your way up. It's not, I like to say life is not a one size fits all. And we have to stop treating it that way. We have to stop trying to duplicate and copy paste other people's approaches and really listen within and listen to what feels true for us. And then the beauty in community is then we get to share that with the people around us. But it's not about, "Oh, I did it this way, so it has to go that way for you." I think everyone wants a certainty of how the roadmap, right, of where they are and then where they wanna get to. And everyone thinks, "Oh, I'll have these steps, and then as long as I follow these steps, it will work out the way that it did for this other person." But there's no guarantee of that, and even if it did work out for you, even if that was actually aligned for you to pursue, I can guarantee your journey from where you are to where you end up is still going to look different and have nuance compared to the other person that gave you those steps. So it's almost like I just kind of gave up on trying to figure out what the steps are and just told spirit, I'm open to embracing my journey. Because at the end of the day, I feel like even though I have this dream and I can feel like what I want to create, there's still so much I don't know. And I want to enjoy that. I want to give you space to also offer me something even better than what I could come up with in my head. And I think that that surrender has been just such a key part of it. How do you experience surrender in your journey? And how do you feel like that plays with the disruption?
I think that's probably my biggest struggle is the surrender because I feel like I always have this expected outcome. And I have to constantly remind myself what the end goal is, right? I know what the end goal is, and I have to constantly remind myself that the end is the end goal no matter how I get there. And I think for me, the hardest part is wanting it to be the way I want it to be instead of allowing it to play out. But I think that as you go in life, you start to learn to let things flow and let things go. I'm very much, I don't always seem like it, but I'm very much type A personality. I think my first big aha moment of not being type A and surrendering was having kids, right? So I had my child, my oldest, and I quickly learned that no matter what you think is going to happen, that ain't what's going to happen. You think you're getting at the door at 9, if you get ready at you or let's say you think you're getting out the door at 9:30, you start getting ready at 9, you have everything all set up. I guarantee you're gonna get to that door and you're gonna be like, and now we have to change the clothes. Just start all over. And so I think that was my first real beginning of learning to surrender and just being able to go with the flow. So for me, surrender, I know when I surrender and just let things happen, it always turns out much better than I thought it was. But for me, that is still the hardest part. And it's funny because I can tell people all day long, you just have to surrender. But then when I have to do it for myself, it's so hard to just let it be. And I
Mhm.
think that also comes back to that building community and having people in your life to just remind you, take a breath and just let it happen. I will say that I think I'm very blessed because my oldest child is that person who's just like, we got stuff to do, but also, can we just take a moment to admire this?
Yeah.
Like, my oldest is very much so that just breathe because I need a moment because look how pretty it is out here. And I am very much so the yes, it's pretty. We got 5 minutes. Let's go. But I think that surrender is, I feel like it's the key to everything, but I just don't think it's easy for everyone, even when we know we have to do it. I know that there are times that I need to just surrender, but I can be honest and say I'm not that person who's just like, yeah, let's just go with the flow. And then I'm like, we're going with the flow. It's okay. But I'm still working on it. We're on chapter 44 and we're still figuring it out.
Well, I also feel like different life experiences require different levels of surrender. Sometimes, for instance, the example you gave of just being out in nature and just admiring pretty low level of surrender, right? Versus losing your job or something like that. In my journey, I've been placed in those situations where it's like I do what I can on my end, and then the rest of it, I just have to say, Spirit, take the wheel. I can only do what I can on my side and show up and keep taking the action. But then at some point, it's kind of almost bigger than us. We don't have full control. And so this brings up a very interesting thing. Have you heard when people will say, we're the creators of our life
Ye-
and all of
Yes.
that? I feel like, from my perspective and lived experience, what feels more true is co creator. Because I think if you say creator, then that gives you all the power. And even though we do have droplets of source in us, it just feels like, but we still have the mystery of it. We still have things that will just happen suddenly. And if you were the full creator, you would be able to have control and create whatever you want. And I think in the manifestation space, it gets really dangerous because we start to tell people basically, like, oh, well, if you're aligned and you do all these things, this is what your outcome should be. But that's not what people's lived experience always is. And then people start to feel like they're doing something wrong. And I feel like I'm just an advocate for self empowerment. Anything that is disempowering you or making you feel like you're wrong or you're not doing it well, we need to cut that out and we need to figure out a different way because we don't need more people walking around feeling disempowered right now. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on any of that, the manifestation, the creation.
I am also a big advocate of co-creating, but before I go and talk about that, I want to talk about I want to touch a little bit on the manifestation because I also noticed there's a very big trend of manifesting and not taking action. I actually
Mm,
did a whole video on this about how manifestation is also action. It's intention and action. You can't just say, I want this to happen and then write it down and then wish for it and then think it's going to happen. You have to also take the action, and that's part of that co-creating. You're manifesting, but you're also taking action. You have to take an active part and be an active role. Yes, that is your creating part, but then you also have to trust in whatever you believe in. If you believe in God, source, higher power, whatever you believe in, you have to also believe in, even if you don't believe in any of that, you have to believe and understand and be aware that there are outside influences, outside forces that you can't help, that you can't stop. And that's going to influence what happens. You just have to be on your end prepared for. We have this saying, there's the saying, be prepared for everything, or just preparation. I can't remember the exact thing, but it's basically saying that if you prepare for everything, you'll be ready for whatever comes, even if you're not ready. And so it's
mm,
just about that co-creating is just being preparing on your end, doing what you can do on your end, and then just letting everything else happen. And that's really what manifestation is. We can't get stuck into, and I think that's part of why people are like, manifestation didn't work. Because one, they expect it to just work. They just want it to work. They don't always realize that it takes action on their part, but then they also expect it to work exactly the way they want to. And that's not what co-creating is. Co-creating and manifesting is about you doing what you do on your end, and that's the co part. And then everything else happens the way that it's going to happen. It's that balance. And I think that's part of what we have lost. And this is something big that I work with people. Part of what we lost is that balance and that realization. And I think that's part of why I love TCM so much, traditional Chinese medicine so much, because we're always talking about balance. It's a big awareness of it's not just this or that, it's this and that.
mm,
Even in the world, we're always like, oh, it's only good. Well, if there weren't things in the world that were bad, would we know what good is? We would not be aware because everything is about that balance. And just like when we say we're doing shadow work, people don't realize the shadow work has to be done on yourself because it's the good and bad. And that's how we go back to that co-creating. Are you only creating or only working on the positive things? Are you not working on the other side too? And you just have to really think about, I don't know, co-creating is such a big thing for me. That is, I love co-creating and I love speaking about it because I just don't think we have full control. I
mhm.
can control myself. I can control how I react to a situation, but I can control nothing about you or anyone else. And so we have to take that into perspective in the world. We can't just create what we want and then expect everything to fall in place because there are outside influences. And so I think it's just figuring out that balance within ourselves and then realizing that the world is everything we do is about co-creation. Everything we do is influenced by others, whether we like it or not.
I love that you brought that into the conversation, the action piece. Because I remember when I was really stuck in thinking, oh, my manifestation, knowing how energy works, and here I've like, figured out the cheat code, and now I could just attract whatever I want. And I wasn't taking the action. And so I didn't get any results. And then I would also go into these spirals, disempowering myself with my energy and saying, oh, my energy must not be good enough because this isn't coming to me. What else do I have to work on? And I got stuck on this, I call it the healing hamster wheel, where you just feel like, oh, let me just heal this and then that. And you have this whole checklist of healing until I got to the point where I was like, at what point is have I done enough healing? I have to honor and respect. I've done more than enough. And here I am on the journey, and all I can do is, like I said earlier, it's about embracing the journey instead of being focused on the destination and getting to that destination. Because sometimes some of the greatest adventures you go on by following a detour, or something catches your eye and you go in that direction and you check it out, and maybe you talk to someone and you discover something, and then that changes your life trajectory. But there's no way to plan for life. We cannot plan how our life exactly will unfold. And so it really does require that surrender piece.
Yes. And I love that you say we can't plan for life because that's the thing is we're always trying to plan for life, but we're always trying to plan for this script that we don't actually know what it says. We just think we know what it says. We're writing a script, but we're writing a story. And then you start doing you're just doing life and you realize the story that you're writing is not the story that you're in. I think that's what happens because you get so hyper focused on this is the story, and then you're like, plot twist. You don't know that it's happening. It's the plot twist, but if you think about it, the plot twist is what makes the story exciting. It's what makes it great, is the plot twist. Life is just a big plot twist.
It makes me think about parenting. You can go get all these books on how to parent, different approaches, how to train your kid to go to the bathroom. But at the end of the day, all that matters is what's in front of you, and that's being present with your kid. I remember there was this podcast, it was so good. They were talking about parenting, and she gave the example of when a kid walks up to you and they're like, hey, look at my cartwheel, I just learned how to do a cartwheel, and then they show you their cartwheel. It's not about the cartwheel, it's about your presence. They just want you
Hmm.
to be there with them. They want you to celebrate. They want to feel like you're there. And it makes me so sad to see there's a lot of parents that are out and about the park, or on their phones, and their kids are playing, or parents that are very absent from their kids' lives. I know people have like different circumstances, but I just feel like ultimately at the end of the day, our kids, our pets, our partners, our family, everyone just really wants our presence at the end of the day. And that's the best place to be, because when you look back on your life, those are going to be the moments that you are able to recollect, the moments that you actually felt life, not the moments you were texting your boss about something work related.
Yes. My dad, I grew up in a military family, so my dad was gone a lot. And I went into the military myself, and my dad said something so profound to me not too long ago. He was like, don't forget to cherish these moments because they're gone so fast. And before you know it, your child is not a child anymore. And he
Mm,
was like, and then all you can think about is the memories that you missed. He's like, he's reminding me to take that time. He was like, I know you feel like you don't have time, but make the time. And
mhm,
I think that for me, I had to take an aha moment because I'm in school, I'm running a business, I'm running multiple businesses. I'm always trying to make my daughter have a better life. And my dad was like, He was kind of like, "Did you guys feel like you had a good life? Cool. Do you wish you had more time with me?" And like, that was it. To me, I was like, wow, it was a reminder that he's like, you just need to make sure you make time. That's what's
Mhm.
important, is making the time, because then before you know it, there isn't any time left. And it was a good reminder of not just my interaction with my child, just interaction with people is, do I make enough time or do I make excuses of why I don't have time?
Oh, that's a good one. Well,
So
thank you so much, Elsa. I really
thank
enjoyed
you.
this conversation, and I feel like it's the first of multiples, so I would love to have you back on. But for today, I would love for you to share how can people connect with you, and I'll make sure to include all your links and everything in the show notes as well.
They can connect with me on social media. I am on TikTok. I am on Instagram, I am on YouTube, and I think one of the best ways to connect with me is I have a monthly cultural circle where we all just get together and we just talk. There's usually a theme. Sometimes there's not, but there's usually a theme. It's about an hour and a half, and we all just get together and talk and build community together and network and help each other out. So that's literally the best way to really just connect with me and connect with others within our community. I will make sure you have all the information so that they can see when the next one is, and I think those are the best ways.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.